الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدًا عبده ورسوله. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, the master of the day of judgment. I bear witness and testimony to the oneness of Allah, to His magnificence, His omnipotence, His might, His glory, to His being the creator and sustainer of all things, the giver of life, the guider of hearts, the master of the day of judgment. And I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is His servant and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon all those who choose to tread in his path until the last day. Ali radiallahu anhu is said to be from amongst the closest of companions to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. That when individuals are described to enter into this faith and designations are given to those who are from amongst the first to convert and to become Muslim, Ali radiallahu anhu, they said that he wasn't given that designation because he was so young when he embraced the faith that he didn't have to consider conversion. He was always on this deen. That when they go from the place of Mecca to Medina, making hijrah so that they can worship Allah freely, and everybody is paired, a Meccan with the Medinese. They are given now this buddy system. And Ali radiallahu anh, he's not paired up with anyone. And he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is his brother? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says to him, Ya Ali, anta akhi fi dunya wal akhirah, that you are my brother in this world and in the next. Considered to be from amongst the most valiant and courageous. Considered to be from amongst the ones that had the most noble of etiquette. Now Ali radiallahu anhu, amongst the pearls of wisdom, that this man who grew up literally in the school of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he tells us that Iman, your faith, it is a light in your heart. And hypocrisy, nifaq, may Allah protect us from it, it is a darkness. We want to be able to understand the meanings of words through those who say them. And there's so much more that we can say about the one who said this statement. We can understand the importance of what is said from the parameter of one who actually lives by the words that he is putting into this world. And recognizing it for us now as a foundational aspect of our religion is this thing of Iman. And where we have a relationship with it directly, indirectly, whether we were born into this faith or we came to it at a later time, this depiction of Ali radiallahu anh is imperative to understand. Because a lot of what we get in translation, it loses nuance. It doesn't allow for us to build a tangible relationship conceptually or practically. And if I was to ask you, what does Iman mean? You might throw back to me some words you memorized from a book or a hadith. If I said to you, what is it really about? You might translate it through different mechanisms. But here, Ali radiallahu anh is giving us a characteristic that has to be deeply reflected upon, both in the primary sense of understanding what it is and understanding more deeply what it is not. That Iman is a light, he says, in your heart. And that hypocrisy, it is a darkness. These things have to be thought about, because the idea of faith is that it serves now as a mode of luminosity, perception and perspective. It allows for it to be something that you can see a little bit different. If we literally were in this room and there was no light from the sun or no light from the ceilings or no light of any kind, regardless of what was here present in this room, the screen behind me, the red cloak there, or anything else, you fundamentally could not see it if you were just in darkness. I could put in front of you the ugliest of ugly or the most beautiful of beauty. You could have sitting in front of you something that was painted by the most historic of artists. You could have something that is built in front of you that is the most magnificent of architecture. You can't see it if it's dark. And so Iman, being defined as light, has to be able to be understood in terms of what it is trying to convey to us. What's the point of all of it? One of the most foundational hadith in our tradition that we are taught is where the angel Jibreel comes and he speaks to the Prophet ﷺ about Islam, Iman, Ihsan. What is the signs of the hour, the last day? And he gives a definition of what Iman is. To believe in Allah and His angels and His messengers and His books and the last day and Qadr, divine will, decree, predestination, the good and bad of it. You can memorize this. You can write it down on a piece of paper. It doesn't necessarily, though, tell you what it means to you or how it is that it actualizes itself. You have to think about it in terms of this thing of light. The opposite of this is kufr. May Allah protect us from it. In Arabic, the word for farmer is also in this same derivation. That the farmer has the same root because kufr is about covering something. And so the farmer covers the seeds when he is engaged in his trade, his practice. And the idea of kufr is that you are in a place now where you're literally covering the light. You're diminishing its capacity, decreasing its ability to be a mechanism through which you perceive, through which you see, through which you process and synthesize. These things become intrinsically linked. And recognition of it becomes a subjective necessity. Because it's your Iman. It exists within you. And may Allah make us from the best of the mu'mineen. But it's not something that's meant to just be memorized. It's something that's meant to be recognized as an intrinsic part within us. It is a light. And like any light, it can increase and decrease. You and I play the role now of consciously determining how it is that we want to engage it. That in another narration, Ali radiallahu anh, he says in Al-Adab al-Mufrad that Iman, it starts as a fragment of light in your being, in your heart. And that as it increases through acts of goodness, he says that the light, it becomes to be magnified and it increases until it becomes to its completion, it's full. And then it overtakes the entire heart of the believer. And he says, similarly, hypocrisy starts as a fragment. And the more that you increase in it, the more that it gains that control. it now begins to extend and expand. And he ends by saying that I swear if you cut open the heart of one that has real Iman, then you would find in it light. And if you cut open the heart of one who has hypocrisy, nifaq, you would find in it darkness. May Allah protect us from it and make us people of light. Why is it an imperative conversation to reflect on? As we move forward in our journeys in this world, everything gets rooted back now to perspective. Everything is rooted now in perception. You can see your job as such an important thing that you will willfully plan to miss your prayers for it. You can see an exam as something that is so important that you won't ask to have it done after the Jumu'ah prayer. You can be in a place where literally in front of you is a person who would be the best companion for you in this world and in this next. But you're in a place where your mind's perception is diminished in its control in relation to the control the heart has over it. And it's just wondering about, well, maybe there's some other girl that's better for me than the one that's right in front of me that I know is going to be good for me, but I'm still not committing to it. The relationship that your Iman has to all of these things cannot be undermined. Can we all move up really close and come in? And you can come in, fill up the gaps in front of you, because a lot more people are going to be joining us. And its cultivation becomes necessary in being able to now approach these different things that come into our daily routines. You can see it experientially. What it means to be attracted to a heart that has just light in it. The sheikh that I'm close to, he came once during a halaqah that we were doing here, and we were talking about the light of the heart and the attractiveness of the light of the heart. The example that he gave was of a little baby born into the world. And he said, do you know why people get so happy when they see a baby? And people gave all kinds of responses, that the baby smells nice, it reminds them of when they had their own children, or they just enjoy holding a child in their hand, or they're happy because they can play with it but then give it back to the parents and not have to deal with cleaning its diapers and everything else. And the sheikh said all those things are true, but people are also attracted to this child because it's a new soul put into this world. There's no defilement or corruption on it. It's just beauty, inward and outward. There's nothing that's come on it yet in terms of any type of bitterness, resentment, frustration, anxiety. May Allah protect us from these things. You can think about it in the frame of when somebody takes their shahada. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us again and again in the hadith, the Quran, it teaches us these principles. That when somebody converts into this religion, that all the wrong that they have done will not be held against them. All the right that they do is counted in their favor. And Quranic verse becomes the base also of giving an indication that the wrong is converted into right and added to the record. And when many of us jump up and down when somebody's taking their shahada, when we go to hug somebody, when we want to be congratulatory of them in that moment, one of the things that's appealing us is that you are literally experiencing now the embracement through the shahada outwardly, but inwardly, an individual whose entire inner state is being cleansed. That's the attraction of real light. Just like a newborn brought into this world. The Battle of Badr, the companions are lined up, and there's a Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ who is known as being a little heavy. And as they are lined up in ranks and they are now being given orders, Badr is where the companions were of a lesser number in comparison to the mushrikeen. And this Sahaba, as he is standing, the Prophet ﷺ, he goes and prods him a little bit, saying that you are not standing in line properly. And the companion says, O Messenger of God, that this religion teaches us about equity and justice, and you should not have prodded me this way. I want to have the ability to do it back to you. And our Prophet doesn't say to him that we are literally at the cusp of the Battle of Badr. We are far outnumbered. You want to go back and forth with me now? But he is a prophet of justice, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so this man tells him that you owe me something, and the Prophet says, yes, you are right. And he lifts up his cloak and says that you can prod me the way that I did to you. And the Sahaba responds by throwing himself, embracing the messenger's body, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says, what are you doing? And he says, Ya Rasulullah, I don't know if we're going to make it out of this battle. And so I wanted one of the last things that I would do in this world to be to embrace you. He's attracted to the light, to the beauty. It's not just faith that's discussed rhetorically or academically. It's something that when you have it, it manifests in these different ways. That the hadith, it says that Iman is something that takes root, it resonates in your heart. It is then expressed and confirmed on your tongue, and then is put into action in this world. And it gives to us now three parameters as we deepen in our understanding of this word, Iman. That it's not just something that you read in a book. It's not just something that sits on a shelf. The seat of your Iman is in your heart. The seat of my Iman is in my heart. And we got to say the word again and again and again. There are languages throughout this world that are spoken in diversity, within Muslim majority contexts, that are not similar in any way and do not draw cognates in any way from one another. You could go to Senegal, you could go to Pakistan, you could go to Turkey, you could go to the Gulf, and across they are using languages that are somewhat similar but also very different, and they maintain the utilization of these terms, Iman, Ihsan, Islam, because you cannot translate them fully. And English is something that we have to begin to understand is an Islamic language. And there are many Muslims who speak English as a primary. And we have to infuse with deep meaning what these original terms mean, and then understand the role that they play in our lives. So somebody says to you, what is Iman? And you say that it is faith. You're not wrong, but it's not a whole picture. If that's all that it means to you, then you're not going to necessarily strive to cultivate a relationship with it. But if I say that my Iman is the light that allows for the eye of my heart to be what sees this world, if I'm in a place where I define it as the source of illumination, that without it, it literally is covering basira. I can't see through my heart without it. If I see it as the mechanism that allows for others to perceive how they perceive. Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, the son of Mary, peace be upon both of them, comes upon the carcass of a donkey, and it is putrid, and there are flies swarming around it. And the disciples speak about this and say, look at how wretched it is. And Isa alayhi salam, he says, look at how beautiful its teeth are. You think on this day of Jumu'ah, what brings you to this place? You think about how the world bombards you to not be conscious in your mode of exerted action. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us that there are 70 some branches of this thing of Iman. The highest of its levels is to testify, La ilaha illallah. And he says the lowest of it is that you remove something harmful from the pathway. It's rooted now in an active mode of engagement. And that spectrum is there. There are gradations, there are degrees. And the things that become blocks are not always necessarily things that we do unto ourselves, but quite often they're things that still nonetheless start to clog up the heart. You know why you fast in Ramadan? It's so you're literally emptying so that you can fill with something else. You know why you come to Jumu'ah, why you have 5 daily prayers, why you read Quran? Why it's called a purification? Because it's literally expelling from your body something so that something else can now take its place. And the idea is not to remove darkness so that you can replace it with darkness. The idea is to remove darkness so that you can replace it with light. The idea is not to remove difficulty and pain and anxiety so you just make room for more difficulty, pain, and anxiety. But the idea is that you take away what is heavy and you replace it with something that uplifts you. The consciousness of that is rooted now in buying into what the tradition teaches us is going to be the mechanism for that kind of inward elevation. You don't engage the Quran with trepidation. You don't engage the Quran with intimidation. You pick it up because you know it's not a book of do's and don'ts, but it gives you a worldview and perspective that teaches you about yourself. It teaches you about this world and others, and it helps you to now navigate the most important part of you, that's your inside. Your charity is not a mindless act that I just write something and not thinking about it other than baseline obligatory fulfillment. But it's a spiritual vehicle that's meant to give me an insight and connection to the beneficiary. That I can be in a place now where I understand this at its most base level. We have everyone move up again. I don't know if you all get tired of me telling you this every week, but I'm going to say it to you because it has to happen. Might as well just do it. And these are difficult questions, but you have to think, what is getting in the way? What is becoming now a block? That kind of light, with it having gradations and degrees, means that there's always opportunity to see with more beauty, to see with more depth, to see with more clarity. There's always a mechanism and a means through which I can be understanding it at a little bit deeper of a level. I don't have to become paranoid with it, but there's a distinction in operating in extremes, that I do nothing or it's something that I'm hyper vigilant about to the point that it becomes a disruption. We are people of the middle way. And the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu is important. I swear by Allah, if you open up the heart of a believer, you find light in it, he says. And if you open up the heart of the hypocrite, you'd find darkness in it. And I don't know about light and darkness in terms of anyone else, but when I read this hadith, the first thing that I said to myself was, what would my heart look like if it was opened up right now? What would I find in there? Irreconciled emotion, things that I haven't expressed. Why? Forgiveness that I could have conveyed but I didn't. Apologies that I just chose not to accept. Would I find the remnants of every lie and every deception and every joke that was at someone else's expense? Would I find the presence of choosing myself and what even isn't really me choosing me? Because as your brother who loves you, if you think choosing yourself means you prioritize dunya over akhirah, you are not choosing yourself. You are simply choosing your body at the expense of your soul. You find different pains. But at some point you got to figure out if you're going to talk to somebody about it or just let it be something that you internalize. Words that hurt and you have to pretend like they don't. Comments that highlight insecurities. And the absence of voices that let you know that you are loved in your entirety. I was sitting with my kids the other day and we were watching the World Cup or highlights on SportsCenter or something. And I'm excited because my children are watching sports. My wife is amazing, I love her, but to give you an idea, I told her that the Bulls were playing the Cavs and she said, "You're making fun of me." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You want me to say that the Cavs is a real team because they're like little cows." And I said, "That's not what the word calves means." And as we're watching this, a TV commercial comes up that my children very excitedly, not even in a way that they are trying to be funny or mean, but they say, "Baba, you should do this." And I look up and it's a commercial for Bosley hair restoration. And Kareem is so excited and he said, "Baba, they can fix this." Sometimes the world makes you feel like parts of you should not be accepted. Allah did not give you Iman as a mechanism to have you walk on eggshells. He gave you Iman as a source of strength so that you can decipher through the light of your heart what all this really means. You pray your prayers because they're a way to strengthen Iman. You give in charity and you volunteer because it's a way to strengthen Iman. You engage in acts of kindness and generosity because it's a way to strengthen the light in your heart that is Iman. You stay away from the haram, the forbidden, not because you're throwing your back against a wall in a state of judgmentalness, but because you don't want to diminish and weaken the light in your heart that is Iman. That you understand that there are people that are around you that look to you, and whether or not you want it, they are there. And the exhaustion, the tiredness, the things that you have to work through, one of the variables that will definitively help to make more sense of all of it and help to process it is going to be this thing of Iman. So when you think on this day of Jumu'ah, somebody opened up your heart, what would they find in it? You want to know the base and the state of it? Think about decisions, behaviors, actions, choices, understanding yourself through yourself. You weren't put into this world with no purpose. That the things that also we align as being our primary purpose is quite often skewed because we're only looking at it through the physical eyes on our body and not the spiritual eyes that Allah has given to us. Does it mean that the bar of entry has to be super high? No, it does not. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh, known as a great companion across the board, he narrates maybe 2 or 3 hadith in total. Most of the companions, they didn't memorize the whole Quran. When you look through the text and you see the people who gave sermons, it wasn't everybody. The bar to entry is not that high. The bar to entry is that you engage in acts of kindness, you honor responsibility, you own up to accountability. If you don't treat your wife well, you don't treat her well. If you do not treat your parents well, then you are not treating them well. If you make fun of people, then you are making fun of people. This has nothing to do with whether or not you have memorized the whole book or not. You are consciously making choices, and if it's hurting somebody, in reality, you are hurting yourself more. Where is the light of Iman at that moment? Kicking in to say that I'm going to see it differently. I'm going to proceed with a different intentionality. Those are just basic things. You can look up, you can engage in, you can start to act upon gradually. If you read the Quran, this word Iman, derivations of it, it's one of the most often quoted derivatives in the book. There are hadith across the board that all they talk about is Iman. Meaning there's no shortage of opportunity, of text you can reflect on to say, what is this really all supposed to be about? On a global scale, our belief in God, the foundational aspect of our Iman, a pure monotheism, has become one of the most weaponized elements to be able to push people down in terms of how distinct perspectives of theology now push people into spaces where they feel like they can elevate themselves by denigrating somebody. You cannot tell me that that is not some tactic of shaitan, that he has turned the basic foundational element of faith as something that is pushing people away rather than bringing them together. That beyond the abstract and academic, if I was to ask most of you, a wager that I'm comfortable making, who is God to you individually? Most of you will not be able to give me an answer. Not because you are a bad Muslim, you are great, but you never thought about it before. It's not even about then making the light magnified. You never turned the light on in the first place. Why wouldn't you see the world the way that you see it? Your Islam is not just an identity variable. It's a system that creates now an opportunity to think about, how do I see this world? And that vision is not just limited by the eyes that I see the world through physically, but your spiritual eyes. How is it that I cultivate that vision? In the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu, that Iman is a light in your heart. Use this day of Jumu'ah to just reflect on it. If it's not that light that's there, there's still things that are in there. What are those things and how am I dealing with them? The things that I put in, the things that others put in, the things that eventually I have to either stand up to, or they're going to continue to be blocks. And when I'm going to be at the end of this world, the only thing that I'm going to have is a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to leave behind. And what's lying ahead of me doesn't matter if I ever saw the world through the reality of its existence. It's there, and I have to then come to a place where there's nothing I can deny of its actual vision, because it'll be in front of me. So take the time now. First step, why do I see things the ways that I do? Why do you think it's so important for you to chase after what you're chasing after? Why do you give up on the things that are going to help your heart in exchange for it? What are the things that are heavy inside? And who do you go to talk to about those things? People who listen empathetically. They listen to understand, not listen to respond. And then on a practical level, not from somebody wretched like me, but go to the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Go to Allah Azza wa Jal in His book and see what He says in terms of ways to nurture and care for this thing of Iman. You're going to find tons of ways that are quite simple, but you just have to act upon them, engage in them. And that light is going to be something that as you start to experience its presence in the way that you perceive the world, it's not something that you're going to ever want to go back to. This is why the hadith tells us that a sign of sound Iman is that you don't want to go back to a state of disbelief. Because once you see the world through it, why would you want to stop seeing beauty? Why would you want to stop seeing light? Why would you want to start seeing people for where they are inadequate as opposed to where they are good? Why would you want to start seeing everybody else as the problem and only seeing you as being correct always versus how you can be a source of remedy and healing? Why would you want to go back to self-centeredness and egocentricity and greed and selfishness? When you see through Iman, you would hate to go back to seeing it in its alternative. And may Allah make us from amongst those who would love to see the world in that way so much that we don't give up anything other than Jannah in exchange for the sacrifice of our faith. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah. Beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We ask that you shower your infinite mercy upon this gathering, granting each and every one who is present herein and our loved ones only the best in this world and the best in the next. We ask, Ya Allah, that if all of us are meant to be together only at this time, at this place, whether we are young or old, male or female, regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our social class, our country of origin, our cultural heritage, whether we are Muslim or come from a different walk of life, Ya Rabbi, if our individual hearts are meant to be in the presence of all other hearts that are gathered here only at this time, at this place, then gather us all together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. Increase us, Ya Allah, in our Iman. Make us from amongst those who see this world through the light of faith that is seated in our hearts. Help us to carry out in those actions that become a means of increase in our faith. And let us be a means of increase in faith for those that are around us. Help us to heal from any of the pains that we are carrying within us. And let us always be those who understand that our role is to not judge what is in somebody else's heart, but to know that if we have ever felt pain, then others have gone through pain as well. And that is the way of your beloved, peace and blessings be upon him, to be a source of healing and hope for all of your creation. Make us like Muhammad, Ya Allah, and help us, Ya Rabbi, to bring out the best in all those who are around us. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وأقم الصلاة.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.